Good evening, everyone, and so grateful for your attendance, and it's so great to see everyone. I think everyone's so happy to see each other. This is our first in-person lecture since the pandemic, and so we're so grateful for everyone in this room. We've had many live summer studio for colleges, film premieres, college workshops, our gala 2 weeks ago, and so many other opportunities, but we're just so grateful to our members. Because of you, the ICA really this year had one of its finest hours, and we're now reaching 60,000 people a week with our online work and education. But we certainly will never give up our live, and seeing all of you is so key. I'd like to thank our sponsors. That's Foster Reeve Architectural and Ornamental Plaster Rink, Dell Mitchell Architects in Hyde Park. And I would like to thank NYSID for hosting us, and we're just so thrilled again to be with you all. We're honored to have Scott Sottile, Damian Samora, and Andrew Oyen of Ferguson and Shamamian Architects with us tonight, along with our dear ICA friend, renowned design journalist Margaret Russell, who we really admire greatly. I think everyone knows Margaret. She served in the industry as editor-in-chief of Architectural Digest, Elle Decor, and Gallery magazines. And plus, personally, I'm a huge fan for her time that she gives to the younger generation, her charity work. And so we're just so thrilled that she'll be moderating the discussion tonight on this glorious book. I hope you all had a chance to look at it, Collaborations, Architecture, Interiors, and Landscape. Rizzoli's here if you'd like to get a copy of the book signed. Ferguson and Shamamian Architects have long been supporters of the ICAA and our champions. In addition to their new Stanford White Award, which they are getting in December, they also received the Lifetime Achievement Award, the Arthur Ross, many years ago, amongst other awards. Mark and Oscar opened the doors to their practice in 1988, two young architects bound by a shared passion for creating a new vision of traditional American architecture adapted for modern day living. And so they didn't really think about a legacy firm, but this is what this firm has turned out to be. And I'm personally glad that earlier in my career, I was friends with Nancy and Howard Marks in Malibu, California, and on one day visiting, this architect showed up, Oscar Shamamian, and he transformed what I would consider a very difficult house that was very plain, not really pretty, into a showplace. And so I actually had, many years ago, my first exposure. That's when I was director of American Ballet Theater. And I'm just so grateful to work with the new partners in the firm that are here with us today. And so with that, collaboration is at the heart of Ferguson and Shamamian's work, as you will see tonight. It not only occurs within the firm, but extends to relationships with interior designers, landscape architects, builders, craftspeople, and so many others. So please join me in welcoming these wonderful new partners, so talented, and our very dear friend, Margaret Russell. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. And thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. It's exciting. You know, I'd seen an off-Broadway show almost as soon as they were allowed to reopen last April, but I think this is actually my very first design event in nearly 2 years. I mean, think about it. It's 2 years. It feels good. So perhaps it's the same for some of you. I'm so grateful to be here tonight, but especially to be celebrating my friends at Ferguson and Shamamian, which is a firm that I have long respected and admired. I loved your story, Peter, of being introduced to Ferguson Shamamian and Oscar at that beautiful house in Malibu that the Marxes owned. For me, it all started more than 2 decades ago when I was a design and decoration editor at Elle Decor, and I had brought a Michael Smith designed project in Montecito to Marion McAvoy, who was my editor-in-chief at the time. And of course, she loved it. It was an exceptional house, and I flew to Los Angeles to do the shoot. The property's main house was a sprawling Portuguese-style villa that was built on the footprint of a century-old ranch house, so it was surrounded by mature trees and gardens. It really fit beautifully its setting. It was a new structure designed by Oscar Shamamian, yet it reflected the charm and patina of a house that had evolved with care and love over time. We were staying on site for the shoot, and I distinctly remember driving up to Montecito on a Friday night and arriving late. We arrived at the gates at around 10 o'clock. Once the gates opened, Michael whispered to me that I should turn off the headlights. And I thought he was just being weird. But then I saw why. A constellation of twinkling pin spotlights, literally hundreds of them, had been installed within Moroccan lanterns that were made of pierced metal and colored glass that were suspended in the branches of the trees leading the way up the winding drive. I remember this as if it was yesterday because it was magical. My introduction to the work of Ferguson Shamamian was beyond beautiful. It was truly magical. The magic and beauty and collaboration required discipline and perseverance, compromise and patience. The words that come to mind when I think of the firm include passion, commitment, enthusiasm, integrity. These qualities infuse the 80-person staff, 40% of whom joined the firm more than a decade ago, which is a reflection of Ferguson and Shamamian's strong tradition of finding, cultivating, and nurturing top talent. The leadership team includes Oscar and Mark, joined by 4 new partners and 3 principals. Scott, Damian, and Andrew have kindly volunteered to represent their colleagues for our discussion, though several team members are here tonight as well. I was thrilled to write the foreword to Collaborations. I've always found a sense of romance in following the evolution of a house from a spark of an idea all the way through to its completion. I love seeing a sketch on a napkin or a scrap of paper and being able to trace the creative path that comes to fruition as a beautifully realized home, one warmed by the life and spirit of its owners. Over the course of my career, many of the homes I've published were created in collaboration with Ferguson and Shamamian. These are some of the most influential residences of our time. They range from country estates to mountain retreats, seaside compounds, and rambling apartments in fabled city buildings. These are memorable projects, the ones that take your breath away. Mark, Oscar, and their team consistently collaborate with a range of top talents, often the designers Victoria Hagan, Michael Smith, and Bunny Williams. And this book also showcases sublime interiors by Nina Campbell, Douglas Durkin, Jacques Grange, Tim Haynes and Kevin Roberts, Madeline Stewart, and Tinu Zavardacci. The idea of collaboration has always been essential to the firm's mission. Mark and Oscar are former protégés of Albert Hadley, and the client and designer-centric approach to projects of Parrish Hadley shaped their original approach to projects, and the client and designer-centric mindset of Parrish Hadley shaped their original approach to projects, even though it was the very antithesis of what was embraced by most other architecture firms at the time. Their early Parrish Hadley work taught them the importance of scale and proportion in decoration, the graceful flow of room layouts, and the power of architecture to help create a sense of comfort, ease, and living well within a space. These principles remain evident in the firm's work today. There's a relaxed elegance in even the most monumental of their projects. The grandeur is subtle, not intimidating. Volumes of space in these houses are unexpectedly intimate. They feel authentic, with no arrogance or bravado. Impeccable architectural details lend a refined sense of the past or celebrate the pure lines of modernism. And in less formal projects, you notice the warmth of hand-hewn surfaces and textures and the play of sunlight on time-worn floors. perhaps most important, there is always a seamless weaving of indoors and out, with lush garden vistas or views of the sea. I spoke with a few of the book's featured designers, and just about all of them mentioned the word trust. Victoria Hagen said that she never needs to explain why something in a room is important. The architects already know. She told me they are incredibly thoughtful listeners, and they look at each project from all perspectives, not only the architecture, but also the interiors and landscape. My clients and I always know we're in good hands, and there's an undeniable level of trust and confidence that they're steering the ship exactly where it needs to go. That sense of trust is shared by the firm's roster of collaborative partners: landscape designers, builders, artisans, contractors, tech consultants, and tradespeople. And trust is the very foundation of what we're here to discuss: collaboration. Okay, guys, please join me. I think actually before we start, some thanks are in order. Damian?
Yes, I think on behalf of all the partners and principals at the firm, we wanted to say a very special thanks to Mark and Oscar, first and foremost, our teachers and leaders. David Macello, our writer, who interviewed all the parties and made the stories come to life. He's here this evening. Thomas Loof and Andrew Fraz, who are also here, and Lisa Romarin, who is not. There are three primary photographers: our book designer, Charles Churchward, and of course, Charles Myers and Andrea Denise from Rizzoli. And Margaret, thank you for leading us today.
This is fun. I've been working in my dining room for 2 years. Good Lord. Ask me back tomorrow. I'll come. So Scott, Andrew, Damian, in truth, when I was asked to write the foreword to this, I thought collaborations was an interesting title because collaboration is not always the first word I think of. When it comes to design projects, I've certainly come across many battling egos when I've been covering projects in the past. How did that turn out? How did you come up with that idea for this first book, which is in a series of books that you're doing?
Well, let's see. We didn't want this to be a monograph. And in truth, I think the most interesting thing that we do every day is get up and think about what other people want. Clients come to us with dreams, and big ideas. And I think everyone at the firm I can think of, our sense of satisfaction is making people happy and sort of shaping those dreams. So that's sort of essence of that.
There was also sort of the notion as well, the amount of work that we've done with multiple designers too, right? And
yes,
sort of featuring those projects over and over again, that some of these collaborations are long-term, either with the clients and doing multiple projects or with designers working with over and over again.
Right. So you blink and 25 years go by.
Yeah. And let's remember where Mark and Oscar came from, right?
Yes,
Parrish
yeah.
Hadley. So there was already a DNA in there to actually work with interior designers. So it started at the beginning.
I didn't really, I knew that they had been at Parrish Hadley, but I didn't really think about how that formed their initial work until I was, reading interviews and different things about it. But it is an interesting thing because when you think about all of the projects that you've done, there is a huge sense of collaboration, which is reflected in the fact that even though there are always new opportunities and great new talents that come your way, you also have a roster of top talents with whom you have worked for years. I think that Mark and Oscar wrote in the foreword that maybe Michael Smith had done like 50 projects with your firm over the years. I've photographed many of them, and many of them are also for repeat clients, in different places. And now also their offspring, which I think is really rather wonderful, because they're choosing you because they have grown up. They've grown up literally, for some of them, their entire lives in these houses. So I think it's super exciting. I loved reading that Oscar and Mark had worked with Bunny at Parrish Hadley, and that she actually gave them their first commission for a project when they went out when they went out on their own.
With the client that they're still working with.
Right, which is featured
Today.
in one of the projects in this book too. So 30 years later, 33 years
Which
later.
project is that?
It's one in Florida.
One in Palm Beach.
Uh-huh,
yeah.
yes.
What is that? So what is it like to be working with, certainly new people all the time, but also working with Bunny or working with Victoria or Michael or some of the other designers who are featured in the book? How do you make it different? How do you look at each project with the same clients often and make it fresh, look at it with a new approach? Is there some sort of study that you're doing when you're working it out? How does it work so you're not repeating yourself in some things? Because I do think sometimes there are people who want to live completely differently at the beach than they do in the city, but then there are people who don't like change and they love, well, I want it to look like this, and I imagine that would just be dull as dirt to be doing the same thing time after time. How do you deal with that?
I think you have to start with where you are first, and I think bring them along in that journey, because you're not going to necessarily put lacquer walls and polished nickel in the middle of Vermont. You can, but it's not exactly where you would start. And you and you have to I think bring them along to that journey. They have a dream, and they don't that's a very good word, I think, and you have to help them build it, interpret it.
Right. I think knowing from the beginning that your goal is to surprise and delight them, so that you want to do something more than they imagined from the beginning. And so I think that we work generally with collaborators who share that same goal. So if we're working with Victoria and we've done a project with the client before, it's like, well, let's do something different. Like we try to push the client as well. And we think that, again, going back to the trust, that if we built that relationship, they begin to trust and say, you were right about some of these other things, maybe you're right about this, and let's give it a go for a little bit.
Right. I think we're fortunate to work with clients who often have very strong ideas about what they're looking for too. So I think that informs that, I think creates the change or the variety or the consistency. And it usually starts off with a story on the first day. Where are we? What is this supposed to look like? What are we all thinking about? And it's coming to that shared vision that really gets us all going.
Other than the people who have come to you for decades, how do most people come to you? Like, how do people find you? Honestly, the landscape is so different now in the past few years.
We're very lucky the phone rings.
I wasn't questioning that. I said, how are they finding your number?
Other clients.
Mostly
a lot
other
of our
clients,
work actually is repeat clients, and then a majority of the rest of it comes from clients who know those clients. So they've experienced the houses, they've visited them, they've walked through them, they said, oh, this is nice, I think I'd like one of these, or something like it. And the last book actually also created a few new clients. So we'll see what this book creates.
And contractors, interior designers, even doormen. Seriously, like a building super who gave us a recommendation for an apartment project. Not kidding. The owner came down and said, I want the contractor and the architect that worked on the apartment above me, because I didn't hear them and I didn't see any dust anywhere.
Oh my God, I love that.
No.
That needs to be included in your next book. I think that's great. Well, I've recommended the firm in the past. I think that when there's a certain level of quality, and I spent so much time in your projects, I know what it's like to open the drawers. Well, if you're shooting, you're like in everybody's closets, and and everything is so beautifully planned, so beautifully finished.
The drawers we often thank Linda London for.
For the long-standing relationships, are people coming to you is there always a set group of ideas, or do you get people coming and saying, say it's with somebody like Victoria Hagan, who you've done many things with, and there's a new client, do they ever come like with no ideas of what they want? And is that great? Is that like blue sky, or is that a challenge because in a way you need to educate them to get them to a certain level?
I think that's what it really comes down to is getting to educating, finding out what they don't like, as well. Sometimes I've worked with clients where they say, boy, I don't know what I'd like. And I said, well, let's try to find out what you don't like, so that at least we can stay out of that. We use pictures, we use all the tools at our disposal to try and start that conversation and continue that conversation to find out what it is. Because ultimately these houses are all portraits of these clients. So our goal is not to leave our stamp on their life, but the inverse of that. So, so I'd say that usually it's they do have an idea, and when they don't have a strong idea, we really try to help them clarify it through probing. Well, where are we? What are we thinking of? What do your other houses look like? What have your other experiences been like? Sometimes silly questions like, how do you make coffee in the morning? Like, just to get started on the conversation about how they're going to live in the house, so that you can begin to understand what their life is like.
But it's both and. It goes back to trust. Those clients that give you all the license to do what you want, you have to bring them along, or else you're on the hook when the coffee
Yeah.
maker's in the wrong place. So you have to figure out how to work with them to actually make them a part of the process as much as they can, they have the appetite for, but also to make sure you're not paying for mistakes.
Mistakes are not a good thing.
No, but they happen.
How do you share ideas? Do people do they still come with binders of pictures? I mean, everything is digital now. Do you deal with Pinterest?
Pinterest a
things?
lot.
Is that really it?
Yeah, a lot of Pinterest.
Needs an editor. Yeah, but
If somebody could figure out how to get Pinterest to distill down into a book and a binder so that we don't have to do it anymore, that'd be amazing.
That is challenging. I think sometimes it depends on who the team is too. Michael, it's about movies. It's often what is the film we're going to do today. But it's the point is to tell stories. You tell stories about what it's all going to be.
What if there's not a story there?
Try to create
I
one.
think you have to make one.
Yeah, you do. You can invent one. I think there's a building, there's a piece of land, there's landscape, there's something there to grab. A history of the place.
Is it harder when people have ideas or when they don't? Or are you just excited about whatever you're doing because you're fabulous architects?
I think it's the extreme at either end are very,
Yeah.
very difficult. I mean, it's the middle is obviously is the easy and the sweet spot, right? It's clients that have a strong vision, but they also have a strong trust, and they say, okay, these are the things I care about, and the rest I'm really looking for you to help guide me.
I think Scott's right.
It's the when they really have no idea or they have every idea, and you say, well, I don't want to just be a draftsman for you.
Our Bershak Granish saying once, there are too many ideas in this room. That's the difficult part.
Never too many ideas. What about, have you ever been really stymied by somebody who comes to you with an idea or a property, like saying, I want this kind of house in this property, and you're like, there's no way we can build a really modernist house, on this piece of land. Like, what happens then? How do you guide people? Because you're also calm. Is there ever anything where there's fire saying, like, we cannot do that?
Rarely.
I'm going through that right now in a different situation where they can and want to overbuild on the site. So the lot is too small for the house that they want. So they want a 3-story house. It won't look good. You can't get back far enough. You can't appreciate it. So you start to talk about that it's a math problem. This isn't a design problem. This is a math problem. Because you can't pack this. You have to start moving things into the basement.
And sometimes it can be an education about place too. Look at your neighborhood. Do you really want to build this thing that is going to stand out? Because ultimately every house of these, whether people see them or not, are some kind of statement and about the people that live there. And so what kind of, so you can help guide them to the statement that they want to make about themselves by saying, well, our experience tells us that, yes, this will be looming and it will look bad, but look at what the history of architecture has taught us through the 100 years of building in this locale.
Mm-hmm.
I will say often our clients are very rational, intelligent people. I think if the firm has a certain profile, there are many different ages and backgrounds and all that, but often very intelligent, and they're open for those conversations. You could say
They understand the reasons.
They do.
They understand the reasons that you explain once you explain it well.
As long as I think what we try never to do is just come back and say, because we don't like it or because it's wrong. It's not wrong.
That's not a good enough reason.
Exactly. It's not wrong, it's just, and maybe inappropriate, or maybe
Out
it
of
strikes the
tune.
right note, exactly, the wrong note. So it's trying to find the language to bring them along because, again, the collaboration is as much with the client as it is with any other member of the team. And so it's a shared vision that, these aren't our houses. They would all be very different if they were.
They're their homes. I'm making your clients far more problematic than I'm sure they are. What is the, and actually I know many of your clients, what is the process? I've never known, like when you have a landscape architect and you have the architects and you have the designers and the clients, I'm sure you have meetings all together at the beginning, but then what's the process as you move on? Because another mini question on the side. What's the fastest project that you've done, and not like a one-bedroom apartment, but something that, all things being equal, like a house. What's the fastest, and then what's the longest?
Oh, gosh.
I'm in the longest. So I won't name names because they're still living. The fastest actually is one in the book where because of scale. So the biggest and the fastest was a house in Maine that the clients really only wanted to be out of it for one summer. They eventually gave us 6 months extra. So they really wanted to be done in sort of 14 months, and they said, I'm going to give you 6 months because I know you'll take 2 years, so I'm only going to give you 6 so that we have some play at the end. And they gave us the resources to make it happen. Hiring good contractors, having an amazing owner's rep, and then providing this team collaborative, nature, and we were able to build something like 60 or 70,000 square feet over 9 buildings in less than 2 years.
You had a very strong story to start with, too.
Right.
That allowed
Yeah.
that process to go.
True.
smoothly.
We had a DNA. We had a
Yes.
very strong DNA of place, so we didn't have a major exploration phase, at least for the main house. Other buildings we did. We had to figure out, I don't know, what is the character of a playhouse? And this is the one where it's got a nightclub that's...
That's a crazy story, but the homeowner there also had really, really distinct ideas. But I know some of your projects go on for years, right?
I'm in 7 years on one right now, and but I think it's part of the journey for them. Like sometimes the process is actually the project. Sometimes this is a person that is enjoying what's at the actual building of a house, the design and building of a house, more than the actual product.
A learning experience.
Yeah.
And those are the people who then photograph it in a magazine and turn around and put it on the market. Those aren't my favorite of your clients.
But because they love the process, so they want to do it again. Like the house in the end isn't the thing. Like the process and the journey can be really fun.
But it's a wonderful process, right? And actually, that's back to my original question. I'm sorry, I segued off. What are what is the meeting process? And forget COVID, all right? Forget Zoom. Let's pretend we're in a normal world, which we will get back to. How does that work? Are you, is there a designer always there? How do you stay in communication as well? Is there fear of missing out? The decisions were made, they're going to affect your work.
It's nice, I think, when everyone's there on the first day. That's my
Yeah.
favorite kind of project. And I've been in meetings where, for instance, the project in Connecticut, the owner was friends with Tino. They'd done a project together. We needed a landscape architect. He introduced her to a friend of his, Miranda Brooks. And it's sort of you sort of gauge the atmosphere in the room. You all start talking a little bit sort of tentatively, and then you move on from there. And I think people become emboldened by sharing good ideas. So I find actually it becomes quite fluid. But I think being there together is the most important.
I think you could expect it to be linear, but you should not expect that. And you should strive for that, and you should strive for the team building. But sometimes the owner comes with a contractor or a lighting designer or someone that isn't necessarily someone that you would be your first choice. But they're part of the team. And you have to figure out a way to communicate with them to get the owner what they need. And I think that's the key, is like, I think playing being part of a team when it's not always rosy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, team sports can be difficult and not bloody, thankfully, here, but they can be very difficult sometimes. And to answer your question, though, throughout the whole process, there's no moment where we ever diverge. Like the idea is to come together at the beginning and stay together all the way through till the day the owner moves in, so that we are hearing the conversations, that there isn't a lot of things being lost in translation or things falling through the cracks. It's how we feel that we're strongest, is the more that we stay together.
We often say we're good listeners, and that's to the client, but also to our peers.
But if it doesn't start out that way, you can quickly convince them. Because sometimes you're not necessarily the ringleader in the room, the owner is. So you have to play that part for a little bit.
It's funny, one of the things that Michael Smith said about you, I spoke with many of the designers who are in the book when I was doing the foreword, and he said that one of the best things about them, in addition to saying what you enabled him to do and the ideas and all these grandiose things, he said one more thing: they're so calm. He said there's no drama. There is a culture of calm at that firm, and I was fascinated by that. I don't know a lot of calm people. We're in the design world.
You might want to poll. There's about 20 members of our firm here tonight, and you can ask them. I think we're more like ducks, where it's all calm on the surface, and we're working really hard behind the scenes to keep it that way.
And I'm sure you're all working hard, and there is a sense of trying to keep it calm. But what does that is a really interesting culture to have, and it's admirable. How do you, for instance, when you're bringing up associates and people are starting out, how do you communicate that? Because there are a lot of people in my life where there's always this level, like they're right below the surface. And I'm not a particularly calm person, but I feel super calm when I'm around those people. I actually don't want to be around that. What are your tips for all of us anxious people here? How do you do that? It must have started at the top. It must have started with Oscar and Mark, who I know not to be crazy people. But
I think it's about, honestly.
It's a serious question.
No, but seriously,
it's
it's a Jim Collins issue, really. It's find the right people, get them on the bus, and then you figure it out together. And so it's about surrounding yourself with people who stay calm. Like when we choose our consultants, we try to find, one of the things I remember Mark saying to me early on is you want to find somebody that is going to be calm under fire with you. Because stuff is going to go wrong. You know that stuff is going to go wrong. And so you want to surround yourself with people who will handle that with some level of without falling apart or blowing up or making the situation worse.
But you also have to think about it in a way like you are in service a little bit here, right? You're actually helping someone do something, but you're still working for them. This is their dream, it's not yours, but you're going to help them achieve it. And I think, the calm, I think should modulate a little bit. I think, keeping calm and when situations require calm is important, but I think being strident sometimes with, sometimes a contractor per se, sorry if you're out there, but I think is sometimes the way to communicate because it's what they understand to get you at your end. But for the most part,
that
works.
That works. If you stay calm most of the time, then if you reach a fever pitch, everybody knows something's really wrong.
Yeah.
So you're able to actually underscore a really important moment. And then I think the rest is just saying that we all really like what we do, and so we come to work every day just wanting to do what we do and work with who we work with. As Andrew said, it's the dream of coming together every day.
We're also kind of in it for the long haul. These projects are usually, they start at 2 years, but they can go more. And I think when you realize you're in it for the long haul, you've got to be pace yourself.
Yeah.
Just take a
yeah,
deep
you're running
breath.
a marathon, not a sprint most of the time.
And forgive yourself when you might actually lose a little bit of steam. But.
I'm sure you all do yoga and other things to stay calm. I'm going to get your secrets. You're not telling us anything. I'm going to get your secrets. I'm going to get your secrets after. There are houses that I can look at and I can say, that's a Ferguson and Shamamian house, whether I'm out at the beach or whatever. Somehow I know without really even knowing. But the greatest gift, perhaps, of the firm is that you can work in different vernaculars. You can work, there are surprising modern projects in the book. There's a level of quality that is consistent, but you can do many different styles of houses. In your heart, how do you describe the aesthetic of what the firm's aesthetic is to all of you? Because you were able to interpret it for different clients. But there is a thread running through, whether it's modern or classic or French Norman or something else. How would you describe that?
I like to think of it as authenticity in a way, but not historically correct, but more, does it feel real? So if you're inventing something, and sometimes they are real inventions, the one with Tim and Kevin, for instance, was complete, vocabulary that we do invent, but it was, what does this building look like on the outside? What, Dorothy Draper, we knew she was consulted on the plan. What would she have done with this? So you're inventing a language, but you're trying to ground it in something, even if it's completely fictional. There's rooted in something. So it feels there's an element of reality that comes in, our authenticity.
The authenticity and invention, that's a good word, because I think sometimes you're in a situation where authenticity doesn't exist in the DNA of the place. And in the book, there's a project with Bunny Williams and Elizabeth Lawrence where Colorado is either Victorian or log cabins. There really isn't anything in between. I'm from Colorado, so I get to say that. But, and, I think trying to figure out, and, how you create something that's appropriate for the place, but also elevates things a little bit more so that this owner can be convinced to, invest in this location. And I think that's where that authenticity comes. You start to look at historical reference, Belgian references, and try and figure out common threads and weave them together in a way that makes sense, that also doesn't overpower the Victorian next door. But
Right. It sometimes is complete fiction. The house in Connecticut we did with Tino, the owner wanted a truly American house. That's what she said. She was,
She was French.
She was
right?
French, yeah. She had the house. She had her grandfather's chateau in France, but so she wanted an American house. But Tino whispered to us after the first meeting, "But she's really European, don't you?"
And Tino is not American either.
He's not American either. So we had to weave in bits of Europeanness into this house to make it feel good for her, but in a way that felt real. So there are lots of stories about how you might do that, whether it's to reference, American versions of the same thing or, low-style European versions, but, it's invention and telling the story, really.
What is it like in a place like LA where you might have 5 different styles of houses in one block? Do you just go with it and say,
Yeah, you play into it.
Yeah.
You play into it and you say, well, anything could be here, right? This is Hollywood. Like this is like the pinnacle of, this is a portrait of a client. We can do anything we want. We have the ability to create fantasy because the place is 100 years old. And so when working with Madeline Stewart, one of her favorite phrases though was, but let's not make it ye oldie with the E at the end. Because
that's very Madeline.
because that didn't exist. So I think it's like trying to, within the parameter of what's possible in LA, only do it so that it looks like it could actually be there. It's not something imported from 200 years ago.
But it has to take a modern family too at the same. That's the part that I think is the fun challenge, right? Mm-hmm. You can create an old-looking house with pantries and galley kitchens if you wanted to, but that's not how people live. So you have to figure out a way to weave the big family room, kitchen, breakfast situation into that kind of a house and still feel natural.
How do you stay on top of the latest things for a kitchen and the latest technology that you need to know? I know you also collaborate with tech experts and different things, but there is a sense of, you all, some big, professional stoves that work and some that don't. Do you have a designated team that handles something like that for you? In-house, not hiring outside experts?
Sort of. It's a hard thing, technology and building technology, but also, appliances and things that the owner interfaces with more changes so frequently. I think it's almost like a hive. I think when there's something interesting and useful and germane to our work, people will be collaborative across the office and they'll share it. And it kind of gets into your brain, but it also lives somewhere you can reference if you needed it. But I think that has served us well for so long.
Yeah, because we highlight the things that work.
Yeah.
Some kitchens work really well, and we'll hear feedback from clients, this worked really well, and we'll hear from their chef, this worked really well, and we're like, okay, well, I think we did okay there.
Yeah.
And then we also hear when it doesn't work.
When it doesn't work, yeah.
So we share amongst ourselves, what we formerly called lessons learned, and I forget, we have a new phrase now.
Best practices.
Best practices.
Can't be negative anymore. So
Right.
That sounds very professional. That's good. And are there things within the firm that are strictly the designer's domain and yours, or are there things you think, she's stepping on my toes? I don't, that we need to be doing that, or is there just
all the lines are blurry, and it really depends on the project.
Yeah.
And internally in the office, our goal is to create a whole bunch of generalists that can do everything.
It's a very fluid situation, and I think when you work with people, as long as we're with Elizabeth and Bunny and Michael and Victoria, you tend to what you're going to complete each other's sentences with things. So
we also learn things. You learn you start thinking about how you might actually lay out a room so you don't put doors in every corner, and then you can't furnish it. It's like
you would not do that, Damian.
I try not to, but that's the architectural conceit, right? The kind of perfect symmetry sometimes, and then you end up handing it off to an interior designer, and they say, "Where's the television? Where's the couch?" I learned that day one very quickly in this office that You got to think about that.
I had an interior designer sort of chastise me once on a site where I put a light fixture on the top of a sloping stair, and he said, "What kind of fixture do you expect me to put there?" And I said, "Good question. I don't know."
And that was the last time, right?
Right, and that was the last time you do something like that.
Our lives have changed so much in the past couple of years, and I'm sure you've been super busy because everybody I know is redoing things that in houses they were staying in. What are you seeing, or what are there changes in what people are asking for now? And I know that we're talking about them projects that would be for 2 and 3 years from now, not next week. But do you think, are there going to be more home offices? Are there more, has it started changing in terms of what people are looking for, or what do you anticipate? What would you be recommending to be thinking forward that people should be more prescient about?
The only common thread I've noticed is I think people are realizing life is short and they're sort of deciding to live their dreams. And there was no pattern to it. We had couples call us, during the middle of this crazy period and say, "You know what, we're moving uptown." People are living in Tribeca, and just the opposite. We're tired of living uptown. We want to move downtown. And there were people calling us from Montana and saying we bought that ranch, or we finally bought that lot at Palm Beach. And I just think people were decided, we should just do this. That's my only.
Abroad, people are calling from different places now, where they realize that you can actually do a lot of design work, and you can build a house with an American architect, but be somewhere completely different. Zoom, that's the one fortunate thing from Zoom.
But there are certainly some clients that have lived in their houses a little more than they had lived in them before. And so things like a homework room has come up. And boy, I don't have a good Zoom background.
Yeah.
I think it's just like everybody else that there is that, okay, it's one more new thing in the world that needs to get integrated into the modern house.
It's definitely a question you ask now that you didn't have to ask before. Do you both need a place to work? Mm-hmm. Do your children do they do their homework in their rooms, or do they need to be somewhere where you can help?
How will you use this office?
Exactly.
And what about the environment? What about sustainability? What about geothermal? I'm sure you've become experts and are hiring experts in that. Are those demands more common as well?
Geothermal for sure. You hit on that one right
standard,
away.
yeah.
Because it's one of those things as well that it has a both and quality, because it's both sustainable and it keeps big machines out of the landscape.
That's pretty.
So
it's life-changing.
So there's lots of those things when they just sort of fit naturally, where they make the house better, and when there's little or no impact.
Yeah, I think the quality that you mentioned, I think, is part of the sustainability. Like, we're not building things in a way that they last 30 years. So the intention is that hopefully it's a legacy house too for their children. So there's always that discussion, quality discussions, that always involves the contractor, and you have to advise them in the right direction. This is not something that you want to last for a short period of time. Geothermal is almost standard now.
Yeah. And to end on a good note, before if anyone in the audience has questions, for each of you, what project, it doesn't, you don't have to say specifically what it was or certainly who a client was, but what do you look back on and think like, that was just the best. I loved being there. I loved the process of that. Or my God, if every client could be like that. What is it for each of you? They're all looking at you, Andrew.
Do you want to go first?
Not all at once.
I think, gosh, in a weird way, this is such an annoying answer, but in a weird way, they're all fun. But I will say the one in Connecticut was, I had to tell the team occasionally, don't expect this to be on every project. It's not going to be this. You better enjoy this along the way. You had a client who wanted to, she was building forever. She wanted to have a place for her family. Her staff were incredibly devoted to her, to the point where they would come to our office and tell us how she lived. You had Tino, who's a good friend of hers. You had Miranda. There was this simpatico with she and Miranda about spiritualism and the landscape. And Miranda brought in her own stonemason, who was this amazing kid. It was just like this kind of dream team. So, I appreciate them all, and they're all some version of that, but I did have to tell the kids, like, enjoy this ride. It's not going to be there.
It's so beautifully represented in the book, and I think David's text was just wonderful because it's almost cinematic, the description, it really comes across. It's lovely. Damian?
Can I have two?
You can have two.
Okay. One is, and they're both current projects, but one is because it's small and it's a challenge. It's under 4,500 square feet. So
I love that that's small.
We live in a rarefied world.
We live in New York.
And it's a Greek revival, and it's in a beautiful setting, and it's everything that I ever educated myself for and more. So I'm excited. And it went away once, so it's not going away anymore. And the other is in Colorado, and it's just because it's kind of it's leaving a special place, and a place that's special to me, that I would have never dreamed working on in my life, and goes to the quality. The quality of the materials is exceptional, and those are two special projects.
It's like asking to pick children, right? I don't have children, but I imagine that what it's like. I really couldn't answer that other than to give a quality answer, which is not helpful, but it's really about clients who share your vision, and you have a really good time together. And everybody on the team really works together. And either I've had 3, 4, 5 relatively recently that are just like this, where everybody gets together, everybody's laughing, everyone has a good time, but something bad happens and everybody sort of deals with it, and the place is beautiful, and it's like surreal to walk through it. So too many to count, actually. Sorry.
Is it Maine your project?
Maine is my project.
Okay,
yeah.
so Maine, I mean, you're doing a disco, you're doing all these different houses. I would have said Maine. Even just being up there, I thought that was great.
Yeah.
Such fun and so exciting.
They're there to have fun. They're there to bowl and to use their disco and to play squash, and it's all there for them.
Oh, no, it's great. So you didn't have to say it. I said it for you. You won't get into trouble. I think we have a microphone if anybody has. I haven't run out of questions, but if anybody has any questions.
You mentioned at the beginning that you didn't want to create a monograph. And as an architect, I would love nothing more than an FNS monograph. So I'm curious if you could elaborate on that decision.
Well, I have to say we were kind of inspired by, Elizabeth and Bunny and Michael, who they, all of a sudden, I started seeing these books that were, about something. They weren't about us, they were about something. And I thought, wow, this is so much more fun than a monograph. This is like, these are the stories of how these things are created are really the most fun part. So
the first book, I think, was a bit of a monograph.
Yes,
It felt
yeah.
something that was like, okay, this is an architect's book for architects.
Right.
And I think we definitely looked at it through that lens. Like, we want to offer our contribution to that canon. I think we said we don't want to do that again.
That was a monumental book. And you guys were so smart because it doesn't really fit on a bookshelf. It has to go
It's on the coffee
on your
table.
cocktail table. I have tried to put it on so many bookshelves in houses because everyone has it. It's a beautiful book.
you can blame Mark for that.
We also have to remember, though, that I think, especially in residential, the world we live in is, the architecture does not exist without interior decoration either, really. It doesn't have any life. So, to create a book that's solely about the architecture without, really bringing everyone else forward, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, look at the cover of the book in the back, the landscape. I mean, it's everything and more. And then the house starts to come through. That's the joy.
I do have to say that as much fun as it is to see the house completed, like the paint being installed, it's really when you walk in after it's been furnished or when the client's moved in and you see that the additions of all that other stuff, that's really where you feel like, oh my God, this is just amazing. And that's, I think, what we wanted to share too.
Well, and there are still drawings at the back of the book, though, if you're interested.
Oh, I love that part of it. And that's very different. I thought that was really wonderful. Anything else?
You work on the house for years, you get to know everybody, but there comes a point where the door closes and the people move in. How does that feel? You're sort of not welcome inside, maybe you're welcome, but only on occasion. How do you respond to that?
it's like being part of a show, like theater, right? It's like you had a run and you're done. And you don't own it, right? It's not your portrait. You were just there to paint it and maybe, sign it in some way, but that's kind of even not ours. It's theirs, it's not ours. And that's the best explanation I can have. But then when you do run into each other, it's a joy.
Yes.
And you get on Christmas cards and all those sorts of things.
To stay for the weekend, and then you're like, well, this is okay. I get it.
That's part work, though, sometimes. But
Right. Or when their daughter calls you, 5 years later, it says, you know what, hi, and you know that.
So I think
That we
the door
interrupted.
never really
Yep.
closes.
there's always a revival.
So I'm just wondering if there are any kind of dream collaborators, like maybe living or dead, interior designers that would be a total fantasy for you to work with.
Oh, gosh. I'm gonna answer that first?
I'll go first.
Um,
I'll go first because I thank you for saying we're dead, because that helps a lot. So, offend anybody in the room. I think someone, honestly, like Francis Elkins would be incredible to work with. Someone that sort of could take the American style and take that work and then push it forward to something new, and to be collaborative with somebody like that, where you'd say we're pushing the boundaries together. I think that's something like that would be incredible.
Right.
And there are people out there today, some of them in this room, who can do that also.
John Fowler would have been fun. He, when you read stories about him choosing paint colors, the incredible knowledge he had, and being brave enough to paint a natural finish room because it was probably originally painted, but just saying we're going to do it. I think that level of scholarship and enthusiasm, that would have been fun.
I don't know. I mean, I think, I'm always surprised when you meet someone socially and you don't know anything about their work, and you realize you have chemistry just as people, and then you discover their work. And I think that happened recently with someone who might remain nameless, but and I hope to work with her someday, because I think it would be that experience. It would be that joy. The work would be, and now you don't have to worry about the work, how it would turn out. It would just be beautiful. So now the process is the only thing you have to worry about. And that's always a joy, not because it's easy, but just because it's joyful.
I'd love to know more about what it's been like for each of you throughout your careers to sort of walk the line between acting as an artist, as individuals, as well as a servant to the client. Like how that boundary has been played out throughout your career.
Good to me.
In all honesty, I've had some very awkward moments. Let's face it, not everyone is necessarily the politest person in the world. But I think after you start, you create that relationship together, you start to, the respect starts building too. And you start having respect for each other and understanding. You're not there to change anyone's view on the world. You're just there to make good architecture and good design. So you have to keep focusing on that. And when it becomes too much for you, that's when you make a change. But I've never encountered that. We've had such people that eventually come around and they understand what you're trying to do for them is give them their dream, and they understand that they have to participate, and they have to participate in a way that is collaborative. No pun intended, because of the title of the book. But
I think ultimately people are appreciative of that. Yeah. I think that you want to listen to them and you want to understand what they want. I think that appeals to people at a very simple, basic level.
I try to operate under the philosophy that clients have great ideas too, and so we're not you said it sort of earlier on. We try really hard not to be the guys with the ego saying this is our vision for you, and so sort of start out by that philosophy. You already make yourself kind of sort of servant artist already. You're already thinking of them as a patron. You're creating their portrait, and so that you're doing that. And then every now and again, when you get yourself into a situation where they maybe aren't as polite, or they aren't as nice, or they're questioning, you say, well, you did hire me. You try to remind them of the situation that, we have experience, we have taste, we have the ability to help shape things, and let's let's take it about less about the particular issue and try to figure out what it is that's not working about that and find an alternate route. So it comes down to, in those moments, problem solving.
Have you ever done something that either the designer or the client was pushing and you said, okay, fine, but you really questioned if it was a good idea, but then it actually was or wasn't?
Oh gosh.
I mean, I think you've done things that you maybe just don't photograph. But, I think in the end, there's always life is compromise in general, all relationships. So, and I think the architect uses all its tools, right? Renderings, samples, mock-ups, colors, things to bring things around. But there are also things that are visceral to people. And if it's that important to someone and it's not really going to be in the photograph, then,
Or I think it plays a little to how, where does this fit in the composition?
Yeah.
And I had a client on a Park Avenue apartment that, I drew, and this was sort of in my earlier days, and I drew a really intricate floor pattern in the front hall. And he looked at it and he said, no, way too much. And then the apartment got done and he kind of goes, I really kind of wish that I'd listened to you and done that because, I could see now that it was highlighting a room that didn't have much else in it, and so it would have created that sort of thing. And the great thing was he hired us to do his next house. so then you get into it, and then you have to have the conversation because, again, when you get into the trust and the working together again, you go, is this one of those situations? Is this the entry hall floor where I'm supposed to listen to you? Or is it the thing where they may be right and you have to check yourself and say, actually they could be just as right as I was at that other moment.
There's a lot of participation in these projects too, and I think there's not just one moment. It's there's so many little moments, where, the client or the interior designer or the landscape architect push an idea, and it's often either, oh my God, they were right, or, oh, that didn't work. But it's not an epiphany. It's part of the messiness of
You don't
all
say
this.
no.
Yeah, you never say
My
you
favorite
try it.
thing to say is, I don't hate it. and then you can work from there.
Oh, see, I say, we'll study that.
That's a good line. I don't hate it.
Very non-committal, right?
When I find things, I usually go, that's so interesting.
Yeah, but everybody knows interesting. They immediately, if you say interesting
In
to a
High
client,
Point, North Carolina, not always.
well.
They're very, when somebody's really proud of what they're introducing, if you say that, they think you got it. If there are other questions, I do have one more. Thinking about the future, you've built such an amazing team at the firm. What do you look for in the next generation of architects? What do you look for when you hire? What are the essential elements?
we should ask our principal career professional development sitting right there.
Yeah, taking applications right here.
Yeah.
Really, Scott?
Why not?
Having done it for so many years in the firm, I've been there almost 22 years. I think that I think that there is a quality that you recognize, very sort of quickly, and it could be either in person or over Zoom. And that quality is sort of passion and enthusiasm, that sparkle, the interest, your question, for example, something that you had not sort of thought about, or from an angle that is sort of surprising. So, call it freshness, call it, sort of integrity, so many things that come into play when you start meeting people, and you just see it, there've been several people in the office that, I've looked them in the eye and say I know we tell everyone that we are very sort of deliberate and sort of we have to take it back and think about it again, but you're in, yeah, I can see it, and you're exactly the kind of person who, sort of we can see that fits in the office and we want to be, with us. We're a large firm, we play small and we are very intimate, but in the end, we have incredible resources that we have to be very thankful for. So.
Good to hear. Thank you. And we'll let you all go to dinner. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, ICAA. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, NYSID. And I hope this is the beginning of many more events. Thank you.